Nicolas Maduro and his wife will appear in a Manhattan federal court today. The former dictator of Venezuela is now in a New York jail cell after the daring U.S. military raid that captured him.
President Trump says the United States is now in control of the South American country. Venezuela's interim president disagrees. CBN's Dale Hurd reports.
Nicolas Maduro will be charged with narco-terrorism and drug trafficking. His lawyers are expected to argue his arrest was illegal and that as a head of state, he's immune from prosecution. Operation Absolute Resolve, the joint military law enforcement arrest of Maduro early Saturday morning, came after the White House says the Venezuelan leader rejected several deals to step down from power. The operation, led by Delta Force operatives, involved 150 aircraft. Maduro was reportedly captured just as he was trying to close the door on a safe room. The attack killed about 32 Cubans who make up his security forces. One U.S. helicopter was hit but continued its mission. U.S. officials say about a half dozen soldiers were injured in the operation. Venezuelans around the world celebrated. Some Democratic leaders called the arrest of Maduro illegal.
It's a violation of the law to do what they did without getting the authorization of Congress.
The president says the U.S. is in control of Venezuela.
We're in charge.
Have you spoken with her?
We're in charge.
But it appears Venezuela's interim president and other officials of the Maduro administration are in control. Delcy Rodriguez is a longtime ally of Maduro, and at first she demanded he be returned, but then struck a more conciliatory tone after Trump threatened a stronger response. Untangling the corrupt Venezuelan government could be very complicated. The Venezuelan military has long been embedded with Cuban officers. Venezuela is allied with Iran, even welcoming Hezbollah operatives, as well as the Russians and Chinese. 8 million Venezuelans fled the nation under the rule of Maduro and Hugo Chavez. 3 million are in Colombia, where Chuck Holton is watching the border traffic.
Every other time I've been to the bridge behind me between Colombia and Venezuela, it's been the scene of absolute chaos, mostly Venezuelans trying to flee their country and get across into Colombia. And I wondered if coming back this time, now that Maduro is gone, there'd be Venezuelans heading back home. But that's not really the case. As a matter of fact, there's probably more journalists on that bridge right now than there are Venezuelans. That's because the Venezuelans say, while they're very happy that Maduro is gone, the regime is still in place, and they're not going to go back home until they know that they can do so safely and not be under the thumb of what's left of the Maduro regime.
Some experts believe Venezuela may have as much as 6 times the oil reserves of the United States. Hugo Chavez ran U.S. oil companies out of the country, and its oil sector is now operating at just 18% capacity. Trump wants to revive it for the benefit of both countries.
Venezuela right now is a dead country. We have to bring it back, and we're going to have big investments by the oil companies to bring back the infrastructure.
New Venezuelan President Rodriguez now says she wants to work with the U.S. Trump has warned the U.S. could launch a second strike on Venezuela, quote, if they don't behave. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Well, CBN chief political analyst David Brody joins us now for more. So the administration's calling this a law enforcement operation. What's the bigger picture?
Well, they're calling it a law enforcement operation because they believe, and they have said, that Nicolas Maduro is a narco-terrorist, that he's not the leader of Venezuela, he's not the president of Venezuela. He can call himself that. Others might recognize him inside the country. Well, clearly inside Venezuela, they recognize him as that. But the United States did not. And so, therefore, it is a law enforcement mechanism or an actual enforcement. And that's where they're going on this. So Gordon, I think that's why you continue to hear Marco Rubio and others continue to say that. And clearly, that'll be the case going forward.
Well, is this a case where, if you break it, you own it? I'm looking at the new Venezuelan leader, Delcy Rodriguez. Her father was a leftist guerrilla. I mean, he kidnapped an American businessman. He died under torture in police custody. Her and her brother are very influential. She's not just, she's the vice president. He's in charge of the legislature. And they both seem to be deeply embedded with Hezbollah. some Lebanese businessmen who are trying to control a great deal of the economy of Venezuela. It just doesn't make any sense that you'd come in and say, okay, well, we've now won it in a lightning strike if you're not trying to deal with that deep corruption and the deep influence of Iran, Hezbollah, China, Russia in Venezuela. Aren't we now fully committed? Don't we really do need boots on the ground?
Well, we're about to find out the answer to a lot of those questions here in the next 30, 60, 90 days, probably within the next 6 months, definitely for sure. And then we can all reevaluate that. But Gordon, you're right on Delcy Rodriguez. Look, I mean, if Maduro's wife was the right-hand woman, if you will, Delcy Rodriguez was also a right-hand woman carrying out many of those devious tasks, deadly tasks there in Venezuela and around the globe. There were sanctions against her by the United States and others. We haven't even talked about the defense minister and the interior minister, all working and still there as part of the Maduro regime. So when President Trump says we're running the country, he's obviously not talking about how there's actual U.S. personnel setting up office and shop right there in Caracas. What he's talking about, clearly, is that they're calling the shots. And Delcy Rodriguez and the defense minister and the interior minister better play ball. And maybe they will now, after seeing what happened to Maduro, or they're going to be out on their, quote, keister, if you will. Whether or not it works, I don't know. I was talking to a couple of experts this morning that have been following the situation there. They believe ultimately this will be about fair and free elections within 6 months. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition.
Well, there was an election. Maduro lost that election and then stayed in power. Why isn't the administration trying to put that group that won the election, why aren't they in charge now?
Because they don't have the actual infrastructure, military and otherwise, to actually take control right now. And in essence, that's the short answer. And they do want to see if Delcy Rodriguez and others will kind of play ball with them a little bit here, because after the Maduro resolution, I'm sorry, what was it, Operation Absolute Resolve, that they believe that these folks will play ball. Now, whether or not, if they don't, then that changes the calculus. And then we can talk more about the opposition leaders coming in. But right now, the Trump administration doesn't believe that Maria Corina Machado and, of course, others will be able to take, in essence, control right now. They don't have the structure to do that right this moment.
Well, it's got to be better than Delcy Rodriguez. I mean, she goes back to Hugo Chavez, and you don't get any more leftists and anti-American. Is there going to be a game here where, we sort of pretend that we run? The people in Venezuela say, we'll play ball for the next 3 years, but you're going to have an election of your own, and there'll be a new administration that won't care about us, and we'll be back to business as usual.
I think that's a real potential concern. And that kind of goes to the larger issue as it relates to how MAGA feels about all of this politically. I mean, there's a situation there clearly about whether or not this is MAGA or not. And you're going to have the Trump administration say, look, this is, in essence, the Trump version of the Monroe Doctrine. They're calling it the Don Doctrine, basically saying, look, this is our backyard. The Western Hemisphere is in our backyard, and we're not going to have bad actors in our backyard. Now, whether or not MAGA buys that or not remains to be seen. I think we have a conversation again in a couple of months, 3 months, 6 months, to see, well, how many boots are on the ground? And if you're going to have boots on the ground, you're going to have to protect those oil refineries or the actual oil infrastructure, I should say, there in Venezuela. That's going to require United States troops. Well, how many? I mean, in Iraq, there were, about 250,000 troops on the ground back then. This is not Iraq. At least that's what the administration says. There's not going to be 250,000 American troops in Venezuela. At least that's what they say now. We'll see what happens in the future. But if that's the case, if this becomes drawn out, while it's not nation building and while they're not trying to say democracy, they're not trying to basically make Venezuela America. They're not doing any of that. They are, in essence, putting some boots on the ground. And the question is how many, and we don't know the answer to that.
Well, if Iraq's a lesson for us, the oil infrastructure of Iraq has not recovered to this day. If Afghanistan is a lesson for us, 20 years of military boots on the ground didn't lead to substantial change. Are we going to see it? Let me give you another history lesson, and you took it all the way back to the Monroe Doctrine. Let's take it back to Noriega. It just seemed to be odd that the very same day, January 3rd, back in 1990, under Bush 1, it's almost identical operation, but a whole lot more military commitment in that operation. Are there any parallels there? And did Bush pay any kind of political cost for taking Noriega?
Well, the political parallels are more in the charges that were brought up against Noriega and Maduro, very similar. As it relates to Noriega himself back in 1989, when George H.W. Bush gave the order to go in and get him, as you know, Gordon, I mean, Noriega was working with the CIA until he wasn't. And said at that point, no, I don't like your plan in terms of what I'm supposed to do. And then all bets were off. And also, let's remember, from just a military standpoint, this was such a precision strike. I mean, no American soldiers hurt, no actual equipment damage. Of course, in the 1989 invasion, when they took Noriega, 23 American service members died in that. So there's a difference. And here's one other point to consider. President Trump continues to say, look, I get in and I get out. He talks about el-Baghdadi killing him, Soleimani killing him, Iran with the nuclear strikes. Okay, that was in and out. This is not in and out. This was in and out over the weekend. But now we have a ... portion of this, and that's the wild card in all of this.
You mentioned Iran. I've got to ask, at some point in time, don't we have to recognize the theocracy is still in place? They're still killing their own citizens who are protesting their government. You know, you make declarations that if you do this, you're going to regret it. Are we looking at boots on the ground there?
Potentially. I mean, you know, with President Trump, it's not just peace through strength, it's peace through action. And that's what we've seen with this president. But I think as it relates to Iran, and others can speak better to this on George Thomas and others, but it's the besiege over there, those Iranian citizen patrols that are in all across that country, that if they start to turn on the regime there in Iran, that will be the final death knell and regime change for sure in Iran.
One last question on Delcy Rodriguez. What do you make of her saying this was a Zionist plot? That, you know, somehow or other Israel is behind the capture of Maduro?
Yeah, we'll join the long chorus of people that blame Israel for everything under the sun. So it doesn't surprise me. And so that's something that the Trump administration isn't necessarily going to not only buy, but even waste some time on, based on the fact that not only is it baseless, but the fact that they've got a few other things on their plate to do.
Doesn't it really underline just how radical she is, and just she's bought into the Hezbollah ideology, the Iranian ideology? It just seems insane to me that a vice president of a South American country would make the allegation that this is a Zionist plot.
100%. And let's remember, that's why she first came out very strongly against what happened to Maduro. And then what happened within 24 to 36 hours later, she was talking about U.S. cooperation, because the U.S. is calling the shots. They will tell her what the next moves are. And by the way, speaking of next moves, let's remember, overnight on Air Force One, as President Trump was coming back from Florida, he talked about Colombia. They better watch out there in Colombia, and also Cuba as well. Not necessarily military force in Cuba, but Cuba, President Trump actually said that they are going to be down for the count very soon. Because in essence, as you know, Gordon, their economy is directly tied to Venezuelan oil.
All right. Well, David, thanks for the insights. It looks like it's going to be a very interesting year. Yeah. Well, in other news, Iran lost a key ally in Maduro. At the same time, it's facing increasing internal political pressure at home. John Jessup has that story and more from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. Iran condemned the United States' action against Nicolas Maduro, even as nationwide protests enter the second week in that country. Fueled by soaring prices, the demonstrations have spread to more than 220 locations across most of Iran's provinces, including the capital, Tehran. The value of Iran's currency, the rial, has plunged to more than $1 million to just $1 US. Security forces are moving to contain the demonstrations. At least 19 people reportedly have been killed so far and more than 1,000 arrested. Well, the mayor of New York, the new mayor rather, is stirring controversy over actions undoing pro-Israel measures taken by his predecessor. Zoran Mamdani, the city's first Muslim mayor, revoked a number of executive orders by former mayor Eric Adams, including an order implementing a definition of anti-Semitism used by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, which says that in some cases, criticism of the state of Israel can be anti-Semitic. Mamdani also revoked an order preventing city agencies from boycotting Israel. Gordon?
Well, it's a new day in New York City, and you look at what a difference an election can make. I'm not sure New York really understands where he's going to go, but he's very serious. I'm a socialist, and this is my agenda. He's also very serious. I'm a Muslim, and this is my agenda. So it's going to play out on a very big stage.